Domine, libéranos.
He vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a blood-stained journal filled with desperate prayers, not to God, but to something far older. In the autumn of 1963, Father Elio Giordano, a 32-year-old priest known for his discipline and devotion, received a sealed letter from the Vatican. It was brief. By the authority of His Holiness, you are to report to the monastery of San Pietro in Vincoli, Rome. You are to enter the Sanctum Obscura and begin archival review. No questions. No visitors. No exit without permission. He had never heard of the Sanctum Obscura before. No one had. Upon arrival, he was led through a narrow corridor beneath the monastery, deeper than any public catacomb. The walls were damp. The air stale with centuries of silence. At the end of the corridor was a heavy iron door with no markings, only a rusted crucifix nailed above it upside down. Inside was a massive underground library, circular, silent, and cold. Towering shelves held crumbling scrolls, forbidden manuscripts, and books that bore no title on their spines. Some were written in languages he couldn't identify. Others, he recognized, but the words were twisted, mirrored, or encoded. His task, as explained by a solemn old bishop who escorted him in, was simple but strict. Read. Catalogue. Do not interpret. Do not remove. Do not question. If something disturbs you, pray. Elio was locked inside from dusk till dawn each day, with only candlelight and a notebook. That first night, as he flipped through a parchment on inverted sacraments, he heard it, the soft, unmistakable sound of a page turning. But he was alone. He stood still. Listened. Then, faintly, he heard something else, a whisper in Latin, not spoken aloud, but inside his head. Tu me invenisti. You found me. And the candle flickered. The library wasn't just silent. It was listening. By the end of his third week in the Sanctum Obscura, Father Elio's nights had grown colder, not in temperature, but in presence. He had stopped asking the guards questions. They never replied anyway. Every morning they opened the heavy door at sunrise, and every evening they locked it behind him. No conversation. No eye contact. One night, while reorganizing a stack of documents labeled De Ritualibus Exilius, on the rituals of exile, Elio noticed a slit in the stone wall behind one of the shelves. Hidden within it was a roll of ancient parchment, unusually stiff and cracked with age. It had no title, only a faded seal, not of the Vatican, but a symbol he had never seen. A human eye with a flame inside the pupil. Unrolling it carefully, he realized the parchment was a fragmented transcript of a forbidden rite, a prayer not meant for God, but for the one beneath the throne. It described a ritual in which the supplicant would chant in reverse, not to ask for blessings, but to exchange truth for peace of mind. At the bottom, hastily scratched in red ink, was a Latin phrase. Veritas in tenebris, cavocat, audietur. Truth lies in the dark, he who calls, will be heard. That night, Elio dreamed again. But this time, it was no ordinary dream. He was back in the library, but it was no longer cold and quiet. The walls were wet, not with water, but blood. And at the center stood a figure, tall, robed, crowned with thorns that bled steadily into its empty eye sockets. Its mouth did not move, but Elio heard its voice clearly. You are not the first, but you are the last. He awoke drenched in sweat, his Bible fallen open beside him. To the book of Job. Chapter 38. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? The candle by his bed had gone out. But no one had entered. Father Elio became consumed. By day, he continued his quiet work, reading, noting, praying. But by night, he would stare at the parchment he had found. tracing the symbol of the flaming eye over and over. Something about it stirred both terror and familiarity in him, like a half-remembered nightmare from childhood. Then, late one evening, he noticed something strange about the floor beneath the northeast bookshelf. The stones there were not original. Newer. Clean-cut. As if they had been replaced. Driven by some impulse he could not explain, Elio returned the next night with a small iron rod and began carefully prying at the cracks. The stone lifted, heavy, but not impossible. Beneath it was a square shaft, just wide enough for a man to descend. He dropped a candle down. It didn't hit the ground for several seconds. He climbed down using a rusted iron ladder. The air below was thick, metallic. The walls were lined with soot. And at the bottom, in the center of a small, circular room, was an altar. Not made of marble, but of obsidian black stone, veined with dark red streaks that pulsed faintly as if alive. Upon the altar was a single object, a cracked chalice, overflowing with dried blood. Around it were hundreds of markings, not letters, but scratches, as though made by fingernails. And above the altar, etched into the low ceiling, Altar Silentii, here, God does not speak. As Elio stood there, frozen, the temperature dropped sharply. Then, 3 knocks. From the ceiling. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. He looked up. There was no one. Only stone. And silence. He climbed out quickly, resealed the entrance, and returned to his chamber. But that night, he didn't sleep. The altar had changed something in him. In the following days, Father Elio stopped praying. Not because he had lost faith, but because he no longer knew who he was praying to. The dreams returned, every night without fail. But now, the robed figure was closer. No longer across the room, but at the foot of his bed. Its hands bled from invisible wounds, and its eyes, though hollow, seemed to burn with recognition. Elio began writing compulsively. Not catalogue entries, but long, frantic journal entries in his native Italian, sometimes switching to Latin mid-sentence without realizing. He wrote of voices in the dark, of shadows that followed him even in candlelight. Of pages that rewrote themselves, books that whispered in languages long dead. He wrote of the altar. And how, after visiting it, he began to hear music, soft, droning hymns that echoed through the stone halls at night, though the monastery above remained silent. On the final page of his journal, the handwriting had deteriorated. Shaky. Erratic. Barely legible. But the message was clear. There is another God. Older. Forgotten. Buried beneath centuries of silence and scripture. I have seen his altar. I have heard his name. I dare not write it. Then one last line, scrawled in Latin, smudged with what appeared to be blood. Ego sum sacrificium. I am the offering. The next morning, Father Elio was gone. His bed untouched. His candle melted into a pool. His journal left open on the stone desk, the ink still fresh. Only one thing was found. His rosary. Burned black. Over 50 years later, in 2015, the Vatican quietly initiated a long-delayed archival digitization project. Among the volunteers was Valentina Russo, a doctoral candidate in theology with a specialization in preconciliar Latin texts. Her assignment was unremarkable at first: scan, log, preserve. Until her mentor, a Monsignor nearing retirement, handed her a plain box marked SO, restricted. These documents were never officially catalogued, he whispered. Do not speak of them outside this room. Inside, wrapped in rotted linen and sealed with wax, was Father Elio's journal. At first, Valentina thought it a hoax, the ravings of a mentally ill priest lost to isolation. But as she read deeper, the language shifted, matching patterns from suppressed apocryphal texts she'd only seen referenced in footnotes. And then the dreams began. First, just flickers, a dark room, a black altar. Then, full visions, a man in a torn cassock whispering her name, even though Father Elio had died decades before she was born. She heard his voice echo through the library's stone corridors, sometimes behind her, sometimes beneath the floorboards. On the third night, she woke up with the word altar scratched into the inside of her forearm. There were no signs of forced entry. No wounds. Just the word, carved shallow. Like it had been written from the inside out. On the security footage from the archival room, Vatican officials found something else. At exactly 3:03 a.m., Valentina stood in front of her scanner. Frozen. She did not move for over 47 minutes. But her lips were moving, mouthing words. The audio had been corrupted. But a lip reader later confirmed the phrase she repeated. "Tu mi invenisti. You found me." She was never seen again. Her laptop, still open, displayed a half-translated line from Father Elio's final entry. The last word she typed was, "Awakening." If truth lies in the dark, perhaps we've never truly known who we've been praying to. If something felt off while listening to this story, maybe you've heard the same whisper they've hidden for centuries. Leave a comment if you've ever heard of the Vatican's forbidden archives, or know a secret they'll never confess. And don't forget, backhand index pointing right, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the stories they never wanted told.